Matthew chapter 10 or Matthew chapter 13, beginning at verse 10. Disciples came and said to him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" He answered and said to them, "Because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it's not been given. For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has, will be taken away from him. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, Hearing you will hear, and shall not understand. Seeing you will see, and not perceive. For the hearts of this people have grown dull. Their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear." Jesus, oh, we want to be in that category. So whatever you got to do in our life tonight to make us have hearing ears and seeing eyes, please. If you need to speak louder, do that. If you need to, if the light needs to be brighter, do that. Whatever you need to do in our lives to bring us into hearing and seeing. Make it so, we pray thee. In your name we ask it. Amen. Rebellion is an absolute disaster. It's a sickening thing. It's a cancer that eats in the inner life, destroys you from the inside out. And when this rebellion is dressed up in religion and religious garments, it's worse than anything can even be described. Which is exactly what you've got going on in chapter 12, which is the whole context and setting for our passage. So when you come to chapter 12, you've got the Pharisees who are consistently and always seemingly after Jesus. And you've got a whole day of Sabbath day where they are listening to him but not hearing. They are seeing him but they're not seeing. And he is desperately trying to communicate to them in this whole scene, but they're not getting it. And it isn't that they even come to him and say, "Well, we disagree with you, let's discuss this." It's that they just shut him down. It's like he hasn't said anything at all. It's like they've not heard anything at all. And if I were trying to describe that group for you and their reaction in chapter 12, I think I would give you tonight just briefly three aspects of what they are like. One would be the aspect of outward. Their total focus of the Pharisees, as you look at chapter 12, and not just chapter 12, but other places as well, is a focus totally, absolutely on the outward. They seem to have no comprehension of the inner spirit and the contribution of that inner spirit to their outward activity. They are simply focused on an outward activity which brings them down to legalism and laws and makes their whole religion a doing religion. And they absolutely miss the entire thing that Jesus is trying to say to them, because he was always focused on the inward. So as the Pharisees are totally focused on the outward, Jesus is totally focused on the inward. But you see, Jesus understood that when you focus on the outward, it not only destroys the outward, because you never can meet up to the outward, regardless of how low you set your standards, you will never meet up to that outward. And it not only destroys the outward, but it destroys the inward. So when you focus on the outer, it destroys the outer and destroys the inner. But Jesus knew if you focus on the inner, that will literally bring new life to the inward part of your life and will literally spawn and grow and spring into the outer part of your living, and you will have victory in both. Did you get that? So if you focus on the outer, it brings destruction to the outer and to the inner. If you focus on the inner, it'll bring strength and victory to the inner as well as the outer. Jesus knew that. But they had absolutely drawn a line and had no I'm not talking about partial consideration. I'm not even talking about a little bit of consideration. They had absolutely no consideration for the inner part of their lives. It was all outward. Now, the obvious thing that takes place is that when you're totally focused on outward achievement and activity, that makes you very, very obstinate. Because you begin to measure, and you measure everybody by this standard of your outward. You don't meet up with yourself, which is irritating, and then it really irritates you when other people don't meet up to it. So you end up being very, very, and when I'm saying obstinate, I'm not talking about, they stubbornly held to their laws. Hey, that isn't a bad thing in itself. That they were faithful to what they believed in, we're not undermining that at all. We're talking about they drew a line on the outward, dismissing the inner, and it made them so focused on the outer that they had no toleration for anything but the outside. And when truth would come, they would dismiss it because it didn't fit into their outward view. And they had no concept of growth. They had no concept of change in their life. They had no concept of, I just discovered a new truth. They had no concept of, my life just changed. It was great, but now it's even greater because I've expanded in what God has been doing in my life. They had no concept of that because that's an inner concept. And if all you've got is outer, they came to a rival place where they leveled off and there was no growth and no progress. They just barely maintained what they had. And they became very, very obstinate. Of course, that immediately brought them into open war. In other words, if you are focused totally on the outer and you are obstinate in that and you've shut everything else down and there's no growth in your life, then you have to declare open war against everything Jesus is. And the reason for that is because Jesus is very, very pushy. See, you would think the Pharisees could just say, we'll go our way, you go your way. But neither Jesus nor the Pharisees are going to do that. And the next thing you have to do is, in open warfare, is you've got to nail him. You've got to crucify him. You've got to bring him to death. You've got to eliminate him. Because he's going to put you in, and he's going to constantly be needling you upon the reality of truth that he wants to communicate to you and bring into your life. And so they had to get rid of him, which again is why they brought him to crucifixion. So if you're totally focused on the outer, you will be very, very obstinate about it because you will draw lines and measure, and you will reject anything that touches the inner, which will bring you to open warfare against the Jesus who's constantly probing your inner heart. So could I suggest to you tonight, if you are miserable, it might just be you are miserable because he is probing your inner heart. And there will be no outer activity that will solve that. And in your misery, you will find yourself crucifying Christ or surrendering to him. Because those are the only two options you have. That's the context of what is taking place in this passage. Now, as we walked into this passage, Jesus says, I am not mad. I'm not against you. Yes, you're totally focused on the outer, and you're obstinate about it. You've drawn lines, and you've declared open warfare, and you've met as a committee to try to find out how you're going to destroy and kill me. I'm not mad about it. I'm not wiping my hands of you. I'm going to keep coming after you. And that's why I'm talking in parables. That's why I'm speaking to you with stories. Because I'm going to take my stories and I'm going to throw them against the brick wall of your system, and I'm going to allow that story to eat into the cracks of your life and literally hang there until in moments of time the Spirit of God will take this story and erupt it into your system, and you will see truth. So I'm not speaking to you in parables to cut you out. I'm not speaking in parables so that you will never know. I'm speaking to parables because I'm cutting you in. And I'm trying to get the reality of truth to you. And if that's what it takes, that's what I'm going to do. Thus, he talks to them in parables. Now, he explains it with a prophecy. And we dealt with that prophecy. And the prophecy is really interesting because in verse 15, we talked about the hearts of this people have grown dull. And we discovered the growing dull idea is calloused, thick. It's the idea of covered over, can't get through to, a shell around it. So he said, your hearts have grown dull, thick, unmovable. And what that has brought about, he says, is that your ears are hearing with that same kind of callousness. In other words, your inner heart is filled with self-centeredness, and that self-centeredness has determined what your ears are going to hear. So everything your ears hear goes through the filter of the self-centeredness and callousness of your own heart. Your eyes, what do they see? They see through the filter of your heart. So everything that you see and everything that you hear literally is through the filter of your inner heart. So the callousness of your heart determines what you see, determines what you hear. But he says, let me expand that for you, because what you see and what you hear literally becomes the mouth that feeds the inner heart. So if your heart is filled with self-centeredness, that determines what you see, that determines what you hear, and what you see and what you hear is more self-centeredness, which feeds the heart, which makes it more self-centeredness, which determines what you hear and what you see, which determines what your heart is going to become, which determines what you see and what you hear. And it's a cycle. I'm telling you parables to break that cycle. How would you come into a person's life and give them a moment, even a brief moment, where God literally turns the lights on and they see in the midst of their darkness? These services have got to be that kind of thing. We don't get together just to get together. We don't get together just to give Sean a chance to sing. We get together for the purpose of moments of time when the cracks that he has filled with his truth that literally would spring into the phenomenal growth that would bring moments of clarity in our lives, and we would say, whoa, the cycle is broken for a moment, and our hearts can respond. Cherish those kind of moments, people, because they don't come often. And it's a miracle when it comes to your life. And if you are so privileged to hear God speak to you, you immediately want to leap at the occasion and embrace, because those moments are special and divinely ordered, because we have a cycle. That's the context. Then he comes to verse 12, or verse 16, and says, but and sets up a contrast. You are not like that. You're not like that. I'm not describing you. Look at me. I'm not describing you. You're not like that. The Pharisees are like that. See, they focus on the outer. They're all locked down. They're obstinate. See, they're in open war against me, but not you. See, you're open. You're seeking. You're desiring. You're receiving. You're breaking with your pride. You're breaking with everything that stands against everything that Jesus wants to give you. Hey, you're wide open to His change in your life. You're seeking Him with your whole heart. Come on, that's you. You're not like them. So when Jesus speaks to you, you respond with everything you've got, don't you? Well, sure you do. And He sets up this contrast. In fact, He says, but, which is the contrast, blessed. Do you see it? Verse 16. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, your ears, for they hear. And He gives you this blessed idea. It's Markurios, and it's an interesting word because it's the same identical word that's given to us in the Beatitudes. In fact, it is a beatitude. Because you see, in the Beatitudes, the word are is not there. So it's not blessed are. Strike that are right out of there. There is no verb. The blessed is the idea of congratulations. The blessed is the idea of whacking you on the back and say, woo, you've made it. You're something. You're special. You're a step above, man. Hey, this is a whack on the back that says, well, congratulations, you've arrived. You're in. You've come to the spatial position. This is such a over comparison to chapter 12. You are so high, you are so in, you are so blessed, you are so fortunate, you are so overlavished with the grace and the wonder of who God is. Congratulations to you. Woo! And no wonder we don't feel sorry for you. Who could feel sorry for you? You are so blessed. That's you. You live in a state of blessedness. Now you realize that in the Greek culture they saw this as in the physical, in the classical Greek, they saw this as a physical place, like an island where there's perfect climate, there's all the food you could possibly, all the resources, the trees, everything is just, like Tennessee. Everything is just like, whoa, and when you arrive at that spot, you don't ever need to go anyplace else. Because this is, the only reason you'd go is to be a missionary someplace. Because this is the place. He said, you've arrived at that place. It's a state of blessedness, which is totally opposite of the doing concept. Hey, they were all wrapped up in the outward. This is an inner state of blessedness within, which has absolutely nothing to do with circumstances. This is a state of existence. This is a whack you on the back. You are so fortunate because you've arrived in this state of blessedness, and circumstances can't shake it, which is why you sing in Philippi jails and in the midst of bed bugs. Oh, I wish I hadn't brought that up. This is, whoa. This is nothing can shake you. Because your circumstances don't dictate. The outward doesn't dictate to you what you are in the inward state of the heart. Which is why you can rejoice in the midst of persecution. Why? Because you're in this state, this inward state of blessedness. So blessed, he says. Wow. And then he tells you in verse 16, because. Why are you blessed? He says, I want to tell you. Why do you have all the resource you need? Well, I want to tell you. Why do you have every good thing that would possibly be necessary to give you the victory that you need for your life. Why are you in that state? Because I want to tell you why. And he moves you immediately into beholding. Now, look at the verse 16. But blessed are your eyes. Blessed are your ears. And why are your eyes and your ears blessed? For they see and they hear. Now, it's really interesting that he changes the seeing word, which is blipo. He changes that word into oida in this passage, which is the idea of not just seeing, but it's more the idea of perceiving, of knowing. It's one of the knowing words. In other words, it isn't you just see. You would think that would be true at first glance, because when you go to the next word, he begins to talk about prophets and righteous men who desire to see what you see, which would have been the revelation of Jesus actually in the flesh before them. They longed to see that hour when the Messiah had come, but he said, but in this verse, he's not talking about a physical seeing. Even in that verse, he's not talking about a physical seeing of the Messiah. What he's talking about is a perceiving and an understanding. And he says, oh, do you get it? You are beholding. The lights have come on. You've grasped the truth. You have got a hold of this. This is coming into your life. You are literally seeing and you are literally understanding, and you are open to it, and the light of God is literally permeating the system of your living, and you have a perception. That's why you're blessed. Because you understand. Oh my, how can I explain this to you? 2 plus 2 equals 4. Dumb crowd. This is going to be a hard illustration. 2 plus 2 equals 4. You learn basic mathematics, multiplication tables, addition tables. You learn those. You got it all down. Now you can move into algebra. Now you can move into calculus. And you know. We have approached Christianity like that. I'll learn more Bible facts. See if you can follow this. I'll learn more Bible facts. I'll be baptized. I'll learn the church stuff. I'll learn how to the Bible stories. And now I'm into biblical calculus. Because I know that's not what he's talking about. See, you don't learn truth and then embrace him. You embrace him and then learn truth. Because he is the truth. And if you don't have him first, then all you've got is a bunch of 2 plus 2 equals 4, which is data and information. That's what he's talking about. So he says, blessed are you. You know why? Because you have opened up yourself to the embrace of the person. And in the embrace of the person of Jesus, you have begun to know truth because he is revealing himself to you, and it's coming together. The Pharisees, all they had was 2 plus 2 equals 4. Outward, learn the knowledge, get the baptism, do this, do that, get this down. And they never embraced him. Thus, they never experienced truth because they never experienced him when he came. They would not embrace him. So our plea to you is what? Our plea to you is that you would embrace him. Well, I don't know the Bible. We're not talking about that. We're talking about embracing the person of Jesus. Well, I don't know how the church. We're not talking about that. We're talking about embracing the person. Well, I don't agree with, well, I used to go. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the embrace of the person of Jesus. And in the embrace of the person of Jesus, truth, He is, will be revealed to you. And you will know. You will perceive. You will be blessed. Otherwise, it's outer. My, are you obstinate? In fact, you're in open war. And we'll end up crucifying Him. But you're not like that. Well, congratulations. You're open. You're seeking. You've embraced Him. And He's revealing. And you've got everything you need in Him. Right? Is that you? Jesus, miss you and everything crumbles. If I miss you, everything is filled with disdain. All I have is miserable information in my life. If I miss you, religion becomes meaningless. And ceremonies become activities. And theology becomes what I think over against what someone else thinks. Could you, dear Jesus, bring us into such an intimacy of your presence? Could we embrace you tonight? All walls are down. Smash our pride. Eliminate our cocky spirit. The independency of being stuck on our own desires. Bring us into an embrace of your person, that you might reveal truth to us, and we would be in a state of blessedness. Heads are bowed. Contrast. Pharisees, focused on the outer, obstinate, in open war. But that's not you, is it? You're open. You're seeking. Would you let Him embrace you tonight? And in the inner conflict of your own heart, and the stress and distress of your own inner being, would you let Him embrace you and reveal truth Himself, so that your eyes can see and your ears can hear? Moments of seeking. Moments of seeking. Be obedient.